Hi, everyone. My name is Rihanna Carusis. I am with the Fund for Our Economic Future, and I just wanted to thank you for joining us today. Bethia Burke, our president, will be presenting. She'll be joining us in just a minute, and looks like we've got lots of people filtering in, so we're going to give folks a few more minutes to join us. In the meantime, as you can see on your screen, another exciting thing happening at the fund in the next week is we will be hosting a capstone event to celebrate the Paradox Prize and showcase many of the strategies that have helped workers access jobs and improve worker mobility across Northeast Ohio. If you are an employer looking for strategies to address this transportation barrier, address this employment barrier, I hope you will consider joining us. And we have a discount code that can get you in free to thank you for joining us today at our webinar and to encourage you to attend. So a couple other reminders, and we'll go over this again in the introduction, but we are recording today's presentation. We will be sharing it publicly. And if you need to drop out early, we will be sending you the link to this so you can catch the whole thing. You'll see your cameras and microphones are turned off. We have a packed agenda today, a lot to cover, which doesn't mean we don't want to hear your questions. We just may not be able to get to them in session, but I would encourage you to put your questions in the chat. We'll answer what we can here and follow up after the fact if we can't answer here. And we will also be sharing the link to a survey at the end of the webinar to invite you to share your feedback, ask additional questions, subscribe for updates, make sure that you're notified when our final report goes live. So stay tuned for that. I am going to turn off my camera and mute myself for another minute while we wait for Bethia to pop on. And looks like we are up to about almost 50 people in the room now, so that is great, but we'll give people another few minutes before we get started. But again, welcome. Drop your questions in the chat, and we'll get started here in just a minute.
All right, good afternoon. I am thrilled to be on this call today. Rihanna, can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're good.
Fantastic. So I know we have a lot of people on this call, and so I'm hoping that I know Rihanna just did some housekeeping with you. Thank you for giving me a minute or two. I was commuting back from Youngstown to get to my stationary place so I could be firmly in front of you all today. We are really excited about sharing where we are on the Where the Workers Work. As Rihanna likely just said, this is very much in progress. And we want to be sure that as we have information, we are conveying it and connecting it because the things that we are looking at here are real-time issues for all of you on the line and everybody else interested in this question of where workforce is today. My name is Bethia Burke. I'm the president of the Fund for Our Economic Future. We are working on this work with several other organizations, including Connexus NEO, based in Summit County, the Ohio Means Jobs that serve Summit and Medina County, Team Northeast Ohio, and Policy Bridge, and the networks that they are bringing to bear across Northeast Ohio to connect with employers and connect with people. This session today is focused on a subset of the work that we are doing. So it is very much focused on this question of what are we hearing from working age adults that have been connected with through this work, and I will give you the headline of how we've approached it. But a flag for you is that this is a part of the analysis. It is not everything. It is not even everything that we're hearing from workers, because I have a binder on my desk with 150 pages of information that we can't possibly go through in this 1-hour call. But that we hope that this is enough of a teaser that you can see how powerful this information might be, the various ways we can cut and digest it, and that it is fodder over time for a lot of discussions about how to better connect people and work, and to make workplaces work for people. As a part of this call, I believe we are not taking live questions, but I am happy for you to put things in the chat. To the degree that I can see it, I will try to respond real time, and then the fun team is welcome to interrupt me and bring up points that feel really relevant and necessary to pause on. I will also say that in our commitment and our spirit to try and bring you the latest and greatest, we just got a cut of the data that we're going to share with you today. We just got a cut based on income, and so there's some things interspersed here that are new and live and real time. So the fun team might join in on those as well. Keep going. And are you, Rihanna and Bashara, seeing the right part of my screen just as I continue? Fantastic. So welcome. We've got a lot of people on the call. We've got, I can see 66 little circles. So not knowing who everybody specifically is, we wanted to give you a sense of who you're on the call with. So you can see on the screen here, we've got a range of people coming from a lot of different perspectives, which is great. We hope that this information is useful to a range of people coming from a lot of different perspectives. We went through this, but today we're going to talk about a snapshot on the demographic data, but really focus on this, what we're seeing so far in the survey results. This effort, this Where the Workers effort, stems from a few things, but for me is encapsulated in two high-level anecdotes. One is what many of us who connect with either are or connect with employers in the region heard as a question, some 6-10 months ago: is the only way for me to get workers back to be 100% remote? Often followed by the statement, I can't be 100% remote. I am in healthcare, hospitality, manufacturing, an environment that doesn't enable that. So that starting point, sort of feeling of not being sure about what to do in this changing world. And then I think the other is the recognition that for many people, priorities have shifted, and that is encapsulated in Policy Bridge has been doing a series of focus groups in connection with this work. And there is a great quote that I won't get exactly right, but is effectively, with the pandemic, for the first time, I was able to pause and reflect on work and life. This is a sentiment that is coming through across income levels, across different kinds of industries, across different ways people are connecting to work, and is reflective of what we're seeing as really the seismic shift in attitudes towards how we think about work, and then that connects differently with different people. That means different things to different people. And that the idea behind this work was that we could try to better understand how that seismic shift was really showing up for people, and how we might understand it differently by different demographic groups, and how we could connect back to then that question of, if I am a person trying to employ people, what does it imply that I should be doing differently if I want to be best in class in retaining and attracting workers? And that our starting point hypothesis as a broad team was that there is more than just the question of should I be fully remote or not, that there are a lot of other things that can be thought about, talked about, evolved in how we think about work that can make a great place to be. We came at this in a couple of ways. We said, well, what can we know just based on what other smart people have done, so that we are using the best information at hand. followed by a way of gaining insight from what companies across Northeast Ohio are already thinking about and doing. So there was both a survey and a series of follow-up roundtables. The survey reached some 750 employers. The roundtables reached more than 350 individuals who engaged in conversation about what companies across the region are doing today to attract and retain workers. And then, as you can see on this slide, today's focus is this working age adult perspective. I'm very excited that we have some data on this. Those who are in the workforce world know that there has been a regular set of questions asked through a variety of means about what skills employers need from their talent base. We have less often, if ever, asked, what do people want out of work? And especially given this change in time right now, it feels very important that we're getting this working age adult perspective. And to do that, there are two things happening. The first, and you'll see the outcomes of this and the slides that are coming, I promise. The first is nearly 5,000 working age adults were reached through a survey conducted by the Center for Marketing and Opinion Research across 11 counties in the region. And then there are a series of follow-on focus groups that are exploring questions that were raised as a result of the data that we found through this survey. Ultimately, we'll be pulling this information together in hopefully an effective and meaningful way as you and others try to do things with it, inform workforce strategies, inform employer practices, think about policies, that is coming. The first iteration of that is coming out at the end of June. So again, hoping that this gives you enough of a teaser that you're paying attention and you can see the more fulsome report and the implications that are coming out in just a few weeks here. And so that's the purpose of today's call. A quick snapshot so you can get a sense when I say nearly 5,000 people from which counties people were surveyed. And then for those who like to think about statistical significance, so you can see how we have a variety of margins of error, all of which are reasonably tight, but in particular, the results we're going to show you today are for the full region. So you can see that there is a pretty small margin of error when we look at the results from the survey across the region because of how the Center for Marketing and Opinion Research sampled the population. There is more on the methodology that either is or will be available on the website, and we're happy to send you more information if you're a person who wants to understand how you can use this data most effectively, but really just to give you a sense of who was surveyed, where, and what that implies about how we can use these results. The weighting is just how these results came together to get to the regional results that you were seeing today. And so who responded to the survey? Let me see if I can, getting stuck on my, across the counties, you see here, we surveyed people, or Seymour surveyed people across these 11 counties, and you can see about 40% of them reported being employed full-time, about 15% employed part-time, and then for a variety of reasons, other folks were unemployed who responded to this survey. We had a variety of responses across demographics of age, race, ethnicity, and we tracked whether or not English is the first language of people who responded. The Center for Marketing and Opinion Research checked the demographics that they surveyed against the population of Northeast Ohio to be sure that they were getting a representative sampling of residents across the region. And you can see here that we also looked at things like gender, children in the home, and marital status. We were, in particular, in things like children in the home, are also able to break it down by the age of the children in the home. We know that it matters. It has mattered. It always matters a lot if you have a 2-year-old versus an 18-year-old, but it has especially mattered in the pandemic when childcare and school closings was such an issue for people staying in work. And finally, you can see across educational attainment how people fell across whether or not they had completed certain levels of education, and then we can break down by family and household income. The family household income is the cut that we just got again yesterday that I believe is incorporated in some ways in some of these slides here. And again, the fun team might chime in on as well. Seeing no questions in the chat on the baseline methodology, I'm going to move into the starting point of what are we seeing. So this is a subset of the findings and the implications, again, intended to be interesting enough to you that you're interested in digging in further, and also pulling out some things that might inspire questions or ideas for further analysis, because we will be working with and on this data for quite some time. So the first thing to say is that work was interrupted by the pandemic. So there were some questions about whether or not job status changed during the past 2 years, and about 30% of all workers who responded to the survey were laid off, and about 30% of workers had either hours cut or took a pay cut. So that's a substantial amount of people. Importantly, the lower a worker's household income, the more likely they were to have had their hours cut. And about 50% of those, so if they had work interrupted in some way because of the pandemic, and were in a lower income bracket, and said that they had either their hours cut or lost their job, about 50% of those people are reporting that reduction was sustained. So we know we're in an inflationary period, and we know that people, especially in lower incomes, are reporting that they are earning less, and they're seeing those earnings, decrease in earnings sustained. This is meaningful, especially for those who are thinking about what happens to lower income residents over time and how important the reconnection to work and higher incomes is. This has been a big question, a big anecdotal discussion with some evidence suggesting that some evidence being developed in the field around trying to understand the impact of extra unemployment benefits. We did ask whether the extra unemployment benefits or other related assistance allowed a respondent to stay out of work longer or to be more selective in their jobs. And looking at that by income, you can see this blue is the lowest income bracket, those who are earning under $25,000 a year. And you can see for the majority of all respondents, the added unemployment benefits did not have an impact on staying out of the workforce. For some, it had a little impact. For a few, it had a lot, but it's not dramatically. It's not a dramatic number of people who are reporting that those extra unemployment benefits allow them to stay out of the workforce. And this is important because there's been a lot of discussion about that being one of the reasons why we have such a mismatch between labor and the economy, and it's not at least showing up in the way that people are reporting it. It's not showing up as a major influence factor for why they might not be at work. If you're following the economic news, you know that over the past 8 or so months, we've started to hear about this thing called the quits rate with a lot more frequency than I certainly had ever heard it before. So people across the nation have been quitting their jobs in record numbers consistently month to month. So people continuing to quit every single month. In this survey, we asked whether people had quit or left their jobs in the past year. You can see here this orange is a yes. So about 20% of all respondents quit or left their job in the past year. And of those, more than half reported, of those who quit, more than half reported that they did not have another job lined up before they quit. Say that makes me personally so nervous to think about quitting my job without another job lined up. But I think it really speaks to the availability of opportunities in the labor market and the degree to which we have been in a choice market for workers who feel like for whatever reason, they have the ability to quit or need to quit without another job lined up. There could be a myriad factors that go into that. What they're saying are the reasons why they left their job. These are the top 4. There was a long list of reasons that people reported as the main reasons they left their job. Again, these are people who quit in the past 12 months, so about 20% of those surveyed. You can see that not the majority of responses, but the highest concentration of responses was in this toxic work environment category. So things that aggregated up into being a negative work environment. This is one of those that we haven't yet, but are going to be digging into how people who responded with this as the reason, a negative work environment as the reason they quit their job, how that is concentrated by race, ethnicity, income, gender. But it is likely a factor in how people are thinking about places of work. People are also reporting feeling overworked. So this is the burnout question that we've been hearing a lot of reporting about burnout. And about 20% of those employed who said, 20% of people who responded said that they had called in sick due to burnout, and 37% felt that they had too much to do and not enough time to finish everything. This is one of those important but probably not surprising things. We've seen things like nurses go on strike because they're feeling overworked in systems that are short-staffed and are overwhelmed with patients. You can think about restaurants closing for a day a week because they're short-staffed, and the choices are either you close or you stretch your already thin staff over a higher amount of higher burden. I know here at the fund, we're hiring for a few positions. Our workload is the same, whether those positions are filled or not. And so managing more work with fewer people across all kinds of industries is something that's happening and is affecting the way people feel about work. This is at a time when we know that there are continue to be external societal events that are causing high stress, from including the pandemic, but also other things like the mass shootings that happened just in this past month, big high-profile mass shootings that are causing emotional distress, and many other things that are factors in people's lives on a day-to-day basis are informing, in addition to the amount of work that folks have on their plate. And this was surprising to me when we got this data back, especially given the amount of quits we've seen in the past year, that about 20% of people who are employed reported that in the next 12 months that they would be likely or somewhat likely to quit their job in the next 12 months. So there's still a number of people out there who are considering quitting, and that implies that unless there are other changes, that the mobility in the labor market will continue. I don't know if it's on a follow-up slide, so I might be scooping myself here, but there are things. People in this category are also, I think it's about half, are reporting that there are things that their employer could do to prevent them from quitting. So for some number of people, about half, there's nothing their employer could do to prevent them from quitting. Is in the next slide, Brianna. Thank you very much. But there is a smaller majority could be, so most plan to quit will look for another job, but a smaller majority could be convinced to stay. So that is an actionable finding out of this, right? That anybody who employs people on this call and hasn't yet done a stay interview or done some way to reconnect with your workforce, it would be a great time to check in with folks and to see what you can do, might be able to do to retain them, because people are saying that there are some things that their employer could do to get them to stay, and that the people who said no, if I'm reading this slide right, the people who said no, is there anything your employer could do to encourage you to stay, are more likely to be lower income, are likely to be younger, are more likely to be non-white, or not a parent. So there are demographic differences in those individuals who are saying there is something their employer could do to make them stay or not, but it feels worth asking when 20% of people who are currently employed are saying that they're likely to quit in the next year. And the people who are employed and planning to look for another job, what they're looking for is a change, and they're feeling reasonably confident that they'll find a job that is at least as good as what they have. And so, in that category, the 40% of people planning to look for another job, I mean, that is an indication of why they're looking, is in part because of this confidence in the labor market. Some are going into, roughly half are looking in a different industry, roughly half in the same industry, roughly half in a different position, roughly a little more, actually roughly 60% a different position, some number in the same position. So it's not all industry switching, it's not all position switching, but there is a fair amount in there that is. A lot has been made of retirements, and especially in Northeast Ohio, where we know we have an older population. There's a lot of interest in how much retirement and potentially early retirement is affecting the workforce. And then within that, there's this question of how much the volatility in the market is affecting the people's decisions or ability to retire or retire early who might have been planning to do so. So this survey was conducted, over the first February, March, April of this year. So people might be feeling a little bit differently today than they were when they responded to the survey. But at that point in time, of those workers who are planning to retire, about a quarter were saying they were going to retire earlier than anticipated. Now, when people see that, there might be an assumption that those people who are retiring earlier than anticipated are people who, saw market gains and are taking advantage of those. And while this is not a measure of wealth, there is some correlation between wealth and income. And you can see that those who are retiring earlier than anticipated are not necessarily concentrated in the upper income demographics. And so understanding, so you can see that the dark orange is those that are retiring earlier than anticipated. This bottom line are those who are making more than $100,000 a year. So here, I think this is an interesting finding here. Those who are making less than $50,000 a year are more likely than the other income demographics to say that they're retiring earlier than anticipated. And that might be forced out versus choosing out. It also might be this just reevaluation of work and life. I mean, there could be a lot of things in there, but it is not, my supposition is it's not as likely to be a wealth push, right? They're not likely to be feeling a sudden strong amount of financial security that is enabling them to retire early. And that another cultural shift during the pandemic has been that there are more services being offered in different ways. So you can, I can imagine that some people on the phone used Instacart for the first time over the past 2 years. And that was in a period where we were already seeing opportunities for things like being an Uber and Lyft driver being an increased thing that people took up. In addition, we know that people do things that are outside of the formal economy or the app-based work, like doing babysitting or yard work for a neighbor. So we wanted to understand, how people are earning money, and that overall, people who are about 21% of respondents reported doing some kind of freelance or contract work, which can be a wide variety of things from formal to informal economy, over the past 2 years. And of those who reported having doing this in the past 2 years, 70% started within the past 2 years. It could be a lot of things, but is likely the intersection of opportunity and necessity. So more services were being offered this way. DoorDash is another that likely increased in popularity over the past 2 years. Meanwhile, places of business closed, people needed more flexibility. So there has been an increase in people doing this kind of work. About a quarter of people see it as their main job. And a majority of folks across, whether it's a main job, a side job, part-time, full-time, retired people doing it, a majority of people enjoy this kind of work. Some people who do this kind of work consider themselves to be not employed. So people who responded that they were not employed also might have responded that they've done this kind of work, have done or are doing this kind of work in the past year. There are some retired respondents who are doing this kind of work. So the freelance contract work is spread over freelance contract and outside of the traditional economy work is spread across a lot of different types of individuals who responded to the survey. And we can look at that by age, family composition, what else they're doing as well. So this slide breaks out and shows you that people, for example, people with children under 5, more people with children under 5 did gig work in the past year or this freelance work in the past year than other groups. And so that might be necessity, that might be flexibility. There's sort of a lot of things that could be driving that. And some concentration in younger workers doing this type of work more frequently, which sort of conforms with existing narrative. You'll see here just as in the details that we have 2 classifications, 18 to 24 and 18 to 30, because people like to look at those 2 different age groups. So there's some overlap between these 2 age groups here, but you can see the largest concentration of people doing this kind of work is in the 18 to 24-year-old age bracket. And then we can see, we can do things with this data. Really, this is for me just to highlight the kinds of things we can explore, depending on what folks tell us they're interested in, is connecting between this kind of question and then which kinds of industries people are in that are doing this kind of work. So 40% of hospitality workers, for example, report doing this kind of part-time contract freelance gig type of work. I will just say, actually, as I go to my next slide, I'm going to go back, that this is the kind of thing that is newer. This understanding the various ways people make their money is newer to workforce and economic analysis because we often don't have ways of tracking income through these paths. And so understanding more about the people who do side work or make up a full job out of work we might otherwise deem as side work is useful as we think about the various ways people connect to jobs and training, or can be useful. Hopefully this is an information overload already, because we still have a few more things that we'd love to highlight and share for you. And again, if you do have things you'd like to point out, observe, comment on, ask questions about as I'm going along, do feel free to use the chat. I said at the top of the call, for those who weren't on the call, at that point, that it's a little hard for us to manage questions with the size of a group that are voiceover, but we'd be happy to take them in the chat and see how we can respond to them. All right, so then thinking about that strategies in workforce to connect people to jobs are, multifold. You might try to pull people in from the sidelines. You might try to retain people. You might try to attract people from other places. Trying to look at different subgroups of who we might pull into jobs. And one is if we look at the not employed population, which is made up of a lot of different kinds of people. Those are people who are choosing not to work for a variety of reasons. Those are people who are in school, and those are people who are unemployed. Of those who are not currently employed, about 54% say that they are not currently looking for work. That leaves 46% of people who are looking for work, who might, there's opportunity there to get them connected to jobs. And then in this 54%, there's a series of questions about like, okay, well, why do we think people aren't looking for work? And might some of them be convinced to look for work? Because that also includes people who might have given up for one reason or another, and in an economy with more options might be enticed back in. I said on the upfront that one of the things that stimulated this conversation and this set of analyses was the belief that we are in a real change in how people are thinking about work. And that it matters to listen to and understand what people are, how that's showing up for individuals. This slide says that more people say that attitudes and priorities are shifting, and more people say work is less important now than it was before the pandemic. So people are thinking about their jobs differently. This orange is the more important. This lighter orange is the less important, and this gray is that there's no change. They feel the same. And then as an example of ways we can look at this in various breakouts, this is again the income breakout. And so you can see that those who say work is more important are more concentrated in lower income. And those who say work is this less important are more concentrated in the higher income, and in particular the $75,000 to $99,000 a year level of earnings. And so I think that's as we try to both understand the workforce as a whole, but not paint with too broad a brush that we miss the different ways people connect, that I don't know what I would have expected, how I would have expected this to break out, but I don't think I would have guessed. I don't think I necessarily would have guessed this breakout. So following up and understanding how those priorities have shifted and what that implies about, again, about reconnection to work could be interesting. I mentioned on the outset that we aren't sharing it here and now today, but there is a companion set of information that we'll be bringing together that came from a set of employer surveys and focus groups. The number one strategy that employers reported using to retain or attract workers was to raise wages. In this set of questions, a good wage was the number one factor for people when choosing a job. So makes sense. Most people work in exchange for income. And what people also said that there were other things that mattered to them when they thought about a job. So meaningful work rated highly, as well as flexible hours and paid time off. I think that, I think later in the deck, we'll likely show you a slide that shows how people responded to the work at home question. But I think one of the ways that I hope the conversation is broadening is from a narrow discussion about whether offices should be remote, hybrid, or in person, to a broader discussion about what did we learn about how to make work more flexible in ways that can enable people to both do a great job at work and live more full lives. And so this is showing up in, I think, in this flexible hours being cited as important to people. And then this chart on the left here is talking about how important salary information is for people. This is one of those seemingly no-brainer changes that many companies could make today in making their job descriptions more attractive or interesting to individuals. So across this was, I think, the strongest signal we got out of all of the data was that across the board, 98% of people said that salary information in a job posting is either very or somewhat important. It is one of those things that seems pretty reasonable. People would love to know what a job pays in order to be interested in applying for it. And it's something that it really just is not consistently practiced. It's something that has been called for in a lot of racial and gender equity practices that are discussed. And I think that what we're hoping is that this kind of information will demonstrate to those who are hesitant to put the information out there that it really does matter to people looking for a job. And then I said that we would, I promised we would talk more about work environment flexibility. And you can see here, this chart on the left is how people are currently working. So the current work environment for, again, the subset of people who said that they were employed. And this one on the right is what people desire. So about 15% of people are currently working fully from home. More than that would like to. So there is a demand, a signal for demand for more people to work remotely, from 15% to about 23% of the workforce. Another 12% say they work mostly from home. Again, more people would like to work mostly from home than currently do. About 17% work mostly from the workplace, and that's pretty consistent with what's being reported as what's being desired. Now, there might be a mismatch there, right? Like somebody might be working fully from the workplace and want to work mostly from the workplace. You can do the circle yourself in your head. But just to say that there are people who do still want to work mostly from the workplace. And there are a chunk of people, it's not as many as currently do. 56% of people say they want to work fully from the workplace, and another 30, and only 37% say that they would like to. So more than half are working fully from work. Less than half want to be doing that. But I think to this, one of the headline questions has been, it's a hyperbole, but does everybody want to work at home? Well, no. I mean, people are saying that that's not everybody wants to work at home. And for anybody who's been on these calls before, you might have heard me say that my husband took a new job and found out he was working fully from home. And that was a household challenge for us because we actually don't have a spot. We created a spot, but we didn't have a natural spot for him to work at home. And it's also not really his personality. And so there are reasons why people are showing up in different places on this wheel. And it's another indication that the workforce is a wide and varied group of people who desire wide and varied things. And so understanding what people want is really important. I have said this phrase choice economy probably 15 times on this call so far. It is not a choice economy for every worker. About 20% of people say it has been difficult to find or keep employment in the past 12 months. That's meaningful. And of those who have said it has been difficult to find or keep employment over the past 12 months, there is a concentration of people in the lowest income bracket. And you can see that it also varies by racial group. So you are more likely to say it has been difficult to find or keep employment in the past 12 months. If you were a person who identified as being Black or multiracial in the survey, you are more likely to say that if you are in the younger age band. You are more likely to say that if you have children in a household under 5. So it is not. It is not true for every worker that it is a choice economy, and especially since we have a disconnect between people and work, that we have more openings. Just last month, it was 2 openings for every 1 person across the United States. So we have more job openings than we have unemployed people or people looking. This implies we should be thinking about strategies that better connect, especially those who are saying it is hard to find or keep a job. And barriers to employment overall were varied. These are the ones that were reported as The top barriers you can see on the slide. This is another. I think we want to do all of these by our various different demographic cuts, but this is another one that will be important and interesting to understand by various demographic groups. This pay too low to support a family one is one that, as a barrier to employment, people have been interested in better understanding. Hypotheses abound. Is it the benefits cliff showing up? So, you know, if I took that job, I would lose my baseline benefits, but it's still not enough to support my family. Is that what this means? Is it what we heard through Policy Bridge from one of their focus groups, that the cost of gas is so high, I can't afford with my paycheck to put the gas in my car that I would need to get to work. So that, you know, the pay is too low. Plug for the Paradox Prize event coming up next week on June 16th to better understand transportation solutions. Is it something else, right? So what does this mean, this pay too low to support? Do I have to work multiple jobs, and working multiple jobs makes it hard to be employed? Lots of things could be in that. Other issues, transportation, we mentioned, I think on the front end of this call, shows up in this survey as a barrier to employment. This is something that the field has known for a long time, and understanding how to better connect people will be important. And then there's you know, a variety of other issues that show up. This slide here, so I just went through a lot of data. Hopefully some of it was pithy enough to be sticky for you. And really, ideally, what I hope is that it inspires you to follow the work, read the posts that we do about it, connect with the broader set of findings when they come out, think about them, get back to us with your thoughts and ideas. But to give you a sense of the kinds of things that we can understand from this survey that we might be really interested in, but not have had a way to understand before. This is an example of how we might then do profiles of varying concentrations of workers from different lenses. So this is those with household incomes under $25,000 a year. You can look at and compare who is represented in that group, which those who work with connecting low-income populations likely won't be surprised by, but what they're saying that they need or want, and what their sentiments are about behavior and connecting to work. These are the kinds of things that we can do by income. We can do them by look at the differences by race, by gender, by geography, by industry. So there's a lot of different ways to look at, think about, and understand this data. I'm going to tell you what's coming next. I'm going to pause for a second in the event that you've been listening intently and you've been dying to put something in the chat and just hadn't had a chance to do so. This is where we find out that the chat function was turned off this whole time as well. Yep. Okay. There's a bunch of stuff in here. Rihanna or Bashar, if you've been following, is there anything from the chat that you would want to bring out?
I would just say that there are a lot of great questions coming through that we're not going to be able to answer today. We don't have the time or necessarily the data cuts that can answer those questions, but they are the types of questions that we hope you'll put in our survey at the end of this so that we can track what people really want to know as we put together our final report and analysis and recommendations. So stay tuned for that. In terms of clarifying questions, somebody very early on noted the differences in, excuse me, responses by counties. Just a detailed clarification point. This work started in the Greater Akron Chamber footprint through the Summit and Medina Workforce Area Council of Governments and Connexus. They started with an employer survey there, and from there, the fund expanded it across the region in addition with the other working group partners who led this work. So that's why you see twice as many respondents in Summit, Medina, and Portage counties for this survey, but they were weighted in the regional analysis to make sure that they're aligned with the regional population.
Thank you for that, Rihanna. I love that I've been saying this whole time, put your questions in the chat and I'll get to them. And then it didn't pop up for me. And so I ignored you all. So thank you for tracking that. I really appreciate it. Bashar, was there anything you wanted to bring in?
Yeah, just a clarifying question around kind of the survey approach. It's so interesting because I feel like in previous presentations, as we've been pushing information out as we get it, we spend more time on the survey methodology. But just one thing to note about the how we were thinking about results, or rather Seymour was presenting results to us, is that it is a representative sample of the region. Which also, and so if you're asking a question, which I think there is a question here in the chat around, 80% of the respondents are white, it is representative of the Northeast Ohio footprint, not Cleveland specific or Akron specific. But of course, if we needed to, or if that's of interest, we can go and dig a little bit deeper because we do have the zip codes of the individuals who responded.
Yeah, and just on that comment as well, just to amplify something that you said, Bashara, and we will, in addition to having the full regional report, we'll aggregate the counties that are associated with specific MSAs, so you will see the demographics be appropriately aligned with the MSA. So for example, all 5 counties associated with the Cleveland Elyria MSA, Cleveland Lorraine Elyria MSA are represented in the sample, and we will aggregate those into a packet. And so you can see both just the reporting on those responses, as well as any differences between those responses in the region. That has already been done with Summit. I mean, I think it's a little bit different than MSA right now because of what the local folks were interested in, but Summit, Medina, Portage was aggregated together, and there were not differences that jumped out at us. But I think both because of the difference in demographics between, say, the Cleveland MSA counties and Wayne County, for example, that there might be some differences that show up that are associated with, in particular, racial demographics, but other demographics that are different between those counties. So we're tracking that, we're doing that. It's just a lot to get through. And what we're really also looking forward to is expanding the universe of people who are interested in the data and making it available to you so you can look at it and think about it in the ways that you want to look at it and think about it. I'm actually going to make a plug right here for something that that is upcoming, which is as part of this work, we're really interested, as I just said, in making sure the data is accessible to you in the variety of ways that you might want to look at it, depending on your entry point, geographic, day job, sort of lots of different reasons people might want to look at the data differently. We have an RFQ that was posted on our site. I don't know if Rihanna can quickly drop it into the chat as well, that we would love to be connected with anybody you know that does a really good job of making complicated data sets accessible and usable to a large number of people. So there's an RFQ. It's in the chat right now. So if you or others, if your organization or other people that you have worked with either have a really good dashboard or you know that they develop really good dashboards, please encourage them to respond to the RFQ. It is relatively straightforward. We're just trying to get a sense of what kinds of providers are out there that can help us convey this to you in the most effective way. So that's what's coming. We say online report and dedicated website. The online report will be, there will be an opportunity to download a narrative that shares our perspectives on what we found and ideally contextualizes it well. So connects to the broader issues that we have all been talking about together for many years, and a website that will host a set of starting point information that we hope grows and develops over time, in particular as it connects to things like the implications of what we're finding and really, what people might do in response to what we've heard, and having a concentrated way of aggregating those ideas and informing the work that folks do in this space. As Rihanna said in the chat, if you're already subscribed, you'll get a ding when the report is live, and if you're not, please subscribe, and that way you'll get access to the information that you need and want. We encourage you to share your thoughts through this survey. We'd love to hear from you. We are talking about this work with a lot of people. We are getting really fantastic, very thoughtful insights and questions, including today, it is making the work better. So I encourage you to share your thoughts through the means that are on the screen or in the link that Rihanna just put in the chat. And we really, this is one of the more interesting and exciting things that we're doing. And I am really thrilled that it's interesting and exciting for you and that you've joined in on this call today. And I hope that it is, if you haven't been following along, that it is a thing that you're now inclined to connect to over time. Thank you for your time today. As a last plug, we said it in this, we've said it a lot over the past 3 years. We saw it again in this survey. Those of you who do this work know transportation is a real barrier to access for people. The lessons from the Paradox Prize, which sought to break the no car, no job, no job, no car paradox that workers face, are going to be shared at the event next week, June 16th at the Agora Theater. Encourage you to register, to come, to join, to hear what the pilots did. I will say there are some very impressive pilots that turned into systemic solutions in a course of 18 months to 2 years. It's just one of those things that is both inspiring, it's inspiring, practical, and there's a lot of work ahead. And so we'd love for you to join us. And with that, thank you, Adrian. With that, thank you for joining today, and we hope to see you soon. I'm going to stay on in case people want to still put things in the chat. So the link will stay live.
Thanks, everyone. Please remember also some of these questions that are data related would be great to capture in the survey. We'll try to pull everything from the chat transcript, but completing the post-webinar survey, we'll make sure that they all end up in the right place as we work on analyses. Thank you.